Rain poured over the Tennessee countryside, turning the red dirt road leading to Greenbrier into a river of mud. Ivy Monroe, 26, drove an old Chevrolet pickup, its dim headlights slicing through the dense curtain of rain. The steady drumming on the windshield blended with a melancholy country song playing softly from the radio. She wore a worn-out denim jacket, mud-spattered rubber boots, and her brown hair was tied up messily beneath a faded baseball cap. Her eyes were sharp but weary, the eyes of someone long used to fighting for every day. Ivy was a single mother, raising her 6-year-old son Caleb on a small farm on the town's edge. The old wooden house with patched-up shingles was all that remained of her family after her parents passed. She worked at the local auto repair shop, sold homemade honey, and did sewing jobs to support Caleb. Every dollar she made went to her son, for milk, books, and shielding him from the town's whispers about that Monroe girl with no husband but a child. Tonight the rain was worse than usual. Ivy had just left the garage after a late shift, a few dollars in her jacket pocket to buy milk. She was planning to stop by the grocery store when, on a deserted stretch of road, her headlights swept across a sleek black Mustang parked askew at the roadside. One tire was stuck in a muddy rut, the engine silent. In this rural place, a fancy car like a Mustang was as out of place as a snowflake in the desert, lost and belonging nowhere. Ivy slowed down, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Don't be stupid, Ivy," she muttered. Getting involved with strangers' problems was never a good idea, especially not in a storm like this. But then the Mustang's door opened and a man stepped out. He wore a gray suit, white shirt soaked through, dark hair plastered to his forehead. He looked cold and refined, like someone who belonged in a Nashville high-rise, not a Tennessee cornfield. Ivy's heart skipped a beat, not because he was handsome, though he clearly was, but because something about him stirred old memories. The man approached, shielding his eyes from the rain. "My car broke down. Do you know how to fix it?" His voice was low and clear, tinged with urgency. Ivy shut off her engine and stepped out. The rain instantly soaked through her jacket, chilling her to the bone. She walked toward him, her gaze meeting his, and both of them froze, as if time itself had halted. "Nathaniel?" Ivy whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Ivy," he said, his voice hoarse, as if her name had just unlocked a door sealed shut for 7 years. Nathaniel Quinn, 33. The man who had once been her husband, on paper, in a rushed, loveless contract marriage. 7 years ago, Ivy was only 19 when her family faced financial ruin. Nathaniel, then a young and ambitious businessman, offered a deal, a wedding to save her family's debts, in return for support from her influential relatives in the Tennessee business world. The ceremony took place in a tiny church. No flowers, no guests. On their wedding night, in a cold hotel room, they shared one intimate moment, brief, awkward, more out of obligation than emotion. By morning, Nathaniel had left for London to run his company, without even a goodbye. Weeks later, Ivy found out she was pregnant, but he was gone. No phone number, no address. She chose to keep the secret, refusing to use her child to tether a man who had seen her as nothing more than a transaction. Now here he was, standing in the rain like a ghost from the past. Ivy turned her face away, trying to hide the storm of emotion. "What's wrong with your car?" she asked coolly, lifting the Mustang's hood. She bent down to inspect the engine, clinging to the work like a shield for her racing hard. Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. Rain streamed down his sharp features. His gaze fell on Ivy's left hand. A simple silver ring glittered beneath the headlights. The same ring he had placed on her finger the day they wed. The ring he thought she had surely thrown away, just as he had left her behind. "You still wear it," Nathaniel said, his voice catching, as if he couldn't believe it. Ivy clenched her fist, hiding the ring. "Don't say anything," she cut him off. "The ignition's flooded. I'll fix it well enough for you to keep going. You should find shelter in this weather." She worked quickly, hands moving fast to pull wires and dry the spark plugs. Every motion was a way to stay composed, to avoid those deep blue eyes that looked so much like Caleb's. Nathaniel stood silently, watching. He wanted to ask why she still wore the ring, why she was here, living like this. but he said nothing. He simply watched the woman who had once been his wife, now fixing his car in the middle of a storm. When the Mustang's engine roared to life, Ivy slammed the hood shut and wiped her hands on her jacket. All set. Go before the rain gets worse. Nathaniel looked at her, his eyes unwavering. Ivy, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, she replied, turning toward her pickup. But she paused, glanced over her shoulder. Don't show up in front of me again, Nathaniel. I don't need you coming back. She climbed into her truck, slammed the door, and drove off, leaving Nathaniel standing alone. The rain kept falling, but he didn't feel cold. Only a burning ache in his chest remained, the ache of someone who had just rediscovered something precious and realized he'd lost it long ago. Inside her truck, Ivy gripped the wheel, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The ring on her finger had never felt heavier. She didn't know that this rain hadn't just brought Nathaniel back. It had also stirred a secret that would change both of their lives forever. Rain still poured relentlessly against the windshield of the Mustang, but Nathaniel Quinn didn't start the engine. He sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the place where Ivy's pickup had vanished into the night. The image of the silver ring on her finger, the ring he once believed was just part of a transaction, kept replaying in his mind. 7 years. 7 years since he'd left Greenbrier, left the young girl with fierce brown eyes behind. And now she was standing before him again, like a wound from the past that had never healed. Nathaniel took a deep breath, trying to dispel the suffocating weight pressing on his chest. He hadn't planned to return to Tennessee, hadn't intended to face the life he'd abandoned, but work, a major real estate development project in Nashville, had brought him back. And then, like some twisted joke from fate, his Mustang had broken down in the rain, and Ivy had appeared. Ivy Monroe, his wife in name only, the woman he once thought he could forget. He started the car, the engine growling to life. But instead of driving toward his hotel in Nashville, Nathaniel found himself turning down the muddy road that led to Ivy's farm. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the ring. Maybe it was the look in her eyes full of pain and resolve. He needed answers, even if he wasn't sure he was ready to hear them. 7 years ago, Greenbrier, Tennessee. 19-year-old Ivy Monroe stood before the mirror in the small bedroom of her family's farmhouse. A simple cream-colored wedding dress clung to her slender frame, her brown hair falling loose around her shoulders. No makeup, no bouquet. This wasn't the wedding she dreamed of as a child. It was a deal. Her family, once one of Tennessee's major agricultural suppliers, was on the brink of bankruptcy. Debts piled high, and the farm was days from foreclosure. Then Nathaniel Quinn, a 26-year-old rising businessman, appeared like a lifeline. The proposal came through a lawyer, a marriage of convenience to help Nathaniel gain standing in Tennessee's business circles, in exchange for him paying off the Monroe family's debts. Ivy hadn't wanted it, but the desperate look in her mother's eyes and the pile of demand letters on the kitchen table made her say yes. Just 1 year, Nathaniel had said during their first meeting, his tone cold but not cruel. After that, you're free. I won't bother you again. The wedding took place in a tiny church outside Greenbrier. Only a few of Ivy's relatives, the lawyer, and Nathaniel were present. He wore a black suit, handsome but distant. When he slipped the silver ring onto her finger, his hand trembled slightly, but his eyes never met hers. The vows were dry, delivered like a legal declaration. On their wedding night, they stayed at an old hotel in town. The room was cold, the scent of damp wood heavy in the air, and the dim yellow light flickered above them. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed, heart heavy. She didn't know what to do or what he expected. Nathaniel stood by the window, staring into the dark. You don't have to do anything, he said in a low voice. This is just a contract. But then unexpectedly, he turned around, and something in his gaze softened. Maybe it was the wine from dinner or the stifling silence of the room, but Nathaniel walked over and sat beside her. I don't want you to be afraid of me, he said quietly. Ivy looked at him, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something real in those blue eyes. Not a cold businessman, but a man just as lost as she was. They didn't speak again. He touched her hand, gentle, hesitant, and then, like a current neither could stop They drew close. It wasn't love, not even passion, but a clumsy moment of closeness born of duty and something faintly human. When Nathaniel kissed her, Ivy closed her eyes and let herself forget the world. Just for a few minutes. Later he lay beside her in silence, and she listened to his steady breathing in the dark. The next morning he was gone. A note on the table read, "Thank you, I'll keep my word. 1 year from now the contract ends, you'll be free." He flew to London to run his company, leaving no phone number, no address. Ivy woke up alone, the silver ring on her finger the only proof that the night had ever happened. 3 weeks later she discovered she was pregnant. Panicked, she tried to contact Nathaniel through his lawyer, but received only a cold response. "Mr. Quinn is unavailable at this time." Her family, though now debt-free, started whispering behind her back. "Poor girl," they said. Ivy held her stomach and made her decision. She would keep the baby. She wouldn't use the child to tie Nathaniel to her. Wouldn't raise her child in a home built on a transaction. She named the baby Caleb, and from that moment on, he became her whole world. Present day, Greenbrier, Tennessee. The Mustang stopped in front of Ivy's farm. The wooden house came into view under the glow of the headlights, roof patched, the fence leaning to one side. Nathaniel stepped out, the rain soaking through his suit. He didn't know what he was doing, but his feet carried him to the door. He knocked, heart pounding. Ivy opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to guarded. She wore an old sweater, her hair damp from a recent shower. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice cold. "I need to talk," Nathaniel replied, trying to stay calm. "About the past." Ivy gripped the doorframe. "There's nothing to talk about, Nathaniel. Go." But before she could close the door, a small voice called from inside the house. "Mom? Who is it?" A 6-year-old boy with tousled brown hair appeared behind her. Nathaniel looked at the boy, and his heart stopped. The blue eyes, the straight nose, the innocent smile. It was like staring at a smaller version of himself from 30 years ago. "Caleb, go to your room, sweetheart," Ivy said, her voice trembling. She ushered the boy away, but Nathaniel's eyes never left him. A thought flickered through his mind, but he didn't dare believe it. Could it be? "Ivy," Nathaniel rasped. "The boy? Whose son is he?" Ivy turned back, her eyes sharp and wounded. "He's mine," she said firmly, "and he has nothing to do with you." She slammed the door shut, leaving Nathaniel standing in the rain. He didn't move, his mind spinning. The ring, the boy, Ivy's eyes. Everything felt like scattered puzzle pieces from a truth he'd never known. He returned to the car, but he knew he couldn't drive away. Not tonight, and maybe not ever again. Inside, Ivy sat on the floor, holding a sleepy Caleb in her arms. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She had tried to forget Nathaniel, tried to build a life for herself and her son. But now he was back, and she knew. The secrets she had buried for 7 years were on the verge of being exposed. Have you ever loved someone in silence for years? Share your story in the comments, and hit the like button if you felt Ivy's pain. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles scattered across the Tennessee fields. Nathaniel Quinn stood beside his Mustang, just a few steps from Ivy Monroe's wooden farmhouse. The sound of that door slamming still echoed in his head, along with Ivy's bitter eyes and the image of the boy, Caleb, with those unmistakable blue eyes just like his. He had meant to get back in the car, drive to Nashville, and leave it all behind like he did 7 years ago. But his feet refused to move. The silver ring on Ivy's finger, Caleb's smile. They were pieces of a puzzle he could no longer ignore. Nathaniel drew in a deep breath, his exhale misting in the cold air. He was never good at handling emotions, never used to being dragged backward into the past. But Caleb's face, the possibility that the boy might be his son, made turning away impossible. He walked toward Ivy's door, muddy leather shoes squelching, suit still damp from the earlier rain. He knocked. The dry, hollow sound echoed into the quiet night. He didn't know what he'd say, but he needed answers. Inside, Ivy held Caleb, who had fallen asleep on her shoulder. She gently laid her son in bed, tucking the blanket around his small frame. Looking down at his peaceful face, her heart tightened. Those bright blue eyes, that radiant smile. He was a mirror of Nathaniel. She had tried to shield him from all of it, from contracts and cold stares, from a world that never wanted him. But now Nathaniel stood just outside, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep the truth hidden. The knock startled her. She glanced out the window and saw Nathaniel's tall frame still there. Her fingers clenched around the edge of the curtain, the silver ring on her left hand digging into her skin like a bitter reminder. She opened the door, her eyes sharp and cold. "I told you to leave, Nathaniel," she said firmly. "Don't make this worse. Just let us be." Nathaniel didn't budge, his eyes locked on hers. "I can't walk away, Ivy," he said, voice low but steady. "Not after seeing that boy. I need to know the truth." "The truth?" Ivy laughed bitterly. "The truth is, you left me 7 years ago, Nathaniel. You don't get to show up now and start demanding things. Go, before I call the neighbors." She slammed the door again, but didn't lock it. She leaned her back against the wood, heart pounding. She wanted him gone. But through the crack in the door, she still heard his footsteps. He hadn't moved. She opened it once more, eyes filled with tired fury. "What do you want, Nathaniel? It's cold, and I don't need the neighbors talking. Come in, but only for a few minutes." Nathaniel stepped inside. The scent of old wood and honey hung in the air. The house was small and simple, but warm. A chipped wooden table, children's drawings taped to the wall, a softly crackling fireplace. He sat down on a wooden chair, his eyes never leaving her. Ivy poured 2 mugs of black coffee, placed one in front of him, then stood leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed as if guarding herself. "Caleb," Nathaniel said, his voice low. "Whose son is he? Ivy?" The question dropped like a stone. Ivy turned her face away, eyes fixed on the floor. "He's my son," she said firmly, "and he has nothing to do with you." "Ivy," Nathaniel stood, taking a step closer, then stopping when she stepped back. "He looks like me. You know it. If Caleb is my son, I have the right to know. Right?" Ivy let out a hollow laugh, eyes rimmed red. "You left, Nathaniel. You abandoned me with nothing but a piece of paper and no explanation. I called your lawyer. I wrote letters. You never answered. And now you come back and talk about rights?" Nathaniel froze. Her words struck like a blade. He wanted to tell her he hadn't known, that he had been buried in work, pressured by his family. But he stayed silent, because she was right. A small voice echoed from the bedroom. "Mom, I'm hungry." Caleb appeared, rubbing his eyes. Ivy knelt beside him, holding him close. "Okay, sweetheart, I'll get you something." She looked up at Nathaniel, her voice cool. "You staying for dinner?" "It's just eggs and toast, but Caleb likes having company." Nathaniel nodded. "I like to stay." Dinner passed in a strange haze, both warm and tense. The small wooden table was crowded with 3 chairs. Caleb chatted nonstop, telling stories about school, the neighbor's dog, his latest drawing. Ivy smiled at him, but never looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel ate slowly, trying to follow Caleb's stories, but his mind circled the same question. Is this boy mine? When Caleb mentioned his wish for a bike, Nathaniel said, "I know a store in Nashville that sells great ones. If your mom agrees, maybe I could take you to look." He looked at Ivy, waiting. She clenched her hands under the table. Her voice was calm but firm. "Thank you, but we're fine. Caleb doesn't need a bike right now." Caleb pouted but didn't argue. Nathaniel felt a wall between him and Ivy, invisible but solid. She was protecting herself, protecting Caleb. He wanted to tear it down, but didn't know where to begin. After dinner, Caleb ran off to play in his room. Ivy cleared the dishes, her back turned. "You should leave," she said quietly. "Don't make this more complicated, Nathaniel. Not for me. For Caleb." "Ivy," he said, stepping closer. "If Caleb is mine, I want to be part of his life. I didn't know you were pregnant. I made a mistake leaving, but I need to know the truth." Ivy turned, eyes glassy with tears. "The truth is, I've raised our son alone for 7 years, Nathaniel. The truth is, I've tried to forget you, but every time I look at Caleb, I see you." Her voice trembled. "Just leave us alone." Nathaniel stood there, heart heavy. He wanted to reach for her, to promise he would make it right. But he only nodded and stepped out the door. As he got into his car, his eyes lingered on the house. Caleb was his. He was almost certain now. And no matter how hard Ivy tried to shut him out, he knew. This time, he couldn't walk away. Dark clouds stretched across the Tennessee sky, warning of an approaching storm. Nathaniel Quinn drove his Mustang away from Ivy Monroe's farmhouse, the sound of the engine blending with the wind sweeping across the fields. Dinner with Ivy and Caleb, the boy who might be his son, left him tangled in emotion, warmth from Caleb's innocent chatter, and pain from Ivy's wounded gaze. Her words echoed in his head. I raised our child alone for 7 years, Nathaniel. He knew he had no right to step back into her life, but the boy with the same piercing blue eyes as his made turning away impossible. Back in the kitchen, Ivy was finishing the dishes from dinner. She tried to focus on the task, but Nathaniel's eyes, deep, questioning, haunted her. She had sent him away, had built her walls high, but he had come back, still standing firm outside her door. The silver ring on her finger, a bitter memory she could never throw away, now felt heavier than ever. She glanced out the window, watching the Mustang's headlights fade into the distance. She exhaled in relief, but her heart was far from settled. She didn't want Nathaniel disrupting the life she had built with Caleb, but part of her couldn't help wondering, was she denying her son the chance to know his father? Thunder rumbled in the distance, followed by a light drizzle. Ivy was wiping the table when she heard a faint drip. She looked up and saw a droplet slipping through a crack in the ceiling, landing on the kitchen floor. Leaking again, she muttered, hurrying to grab an old bucket. The roof had been damaged for years, but she didn't have the money to fix it. She considered climbing up to inspect it, but with the wind howling and thunder rolling, she hesitated. Caleb was asleep, and she didn't want to leave him alone. Suddenly, headlights swept across the yard. Ivy's heart jumped. Nathaniel's Mustang pulled back into the driveway and parked. He stepped out, his suit damp from the rain, and hurried to the porch. Ivy opened the door, her expression a mix of surprise and frustration. Nathaniel, I told you to leave. Why are you back? I heard the weather report on the radio, he said, his voice low as rain slid down his hair. They're calling for a big storm tonight. Your roof. I saw it leaking during dinner. Let me help. Ivy gripped the doorframe. I can handle it. You don't need to get involved. Ivy, Nathaniel said, his voice steady. Caleb's asleep in there. If that roof gives in, he could be in danger. I'm not walking away while you and your son are at risk. She wanted to refuse again, to shut him out like before. But another clap of thunder shook the air, and the thought of Caleb sleeping beneath a faulty roof made her falter. She bit her lip and nodded reluctantly. Fine, but just the roof. When you're done, you leave. Nathaniel nodded and stepped inside. The scent of old wood and honey filled the air. Ivy handed him a rusted toolbox, along with a hammer and a few spare shingles. Ladder's out back, she said coolly. I'll help. They climbed onto the roof in the soft rain, the cold wind biting at their skin. Nathaniel, unaccustomed to manual work, moved carefully as he placed the shingles, sealing the leaks. Ivy worked beside him, quick, practiced, like someone used to doing everything on her own. They didn't speak. Only the sound of rain and hammering filled the silence. Yet in that silence, there was something strange, an unspoken closeness, as if they were sharing a burden too heavy to name. As Nathaniel laid the last shingle, Ivy slipped on the wet rooftop. He reached out, grabbing her hand and pulling her into his arms. For a moment, they stood still, bodies close, breath mingling in the cold air. Rain streamed down Ivy's face, highlighting her fierce brown eyes still brimming with hurt. Nathaniel didn't let go, his gaze locked on hers. Ivy, he whispered, voice rough. I'm sorry for everything I did. She shook her head, trying to pull away, but he held her gently. Don't, Ivy, she said, her voice trembling. You don't understand, Nathaniel. You never did. He drew her closer in a quiet embrace, as if trying to offer warmth in the freezing rain. His hug was steady, secure, so unlike the storm around them. Ivy didn't return the gesture, but she didn't push him away either. She could hear his heartbeat, and some buried part of her, the part she had silenced for years, wanted to believe he truly meant it, that he truly regretted what he had done. But the pain from 7 years ago still lingered, like a scar that had never healed. They pulled apart, eyes meeting in silence. Ivy wiped the rain from her cheek, her voice low. "Don't do that again, Nathaniel. We can't go back." Nathaniel nodded, respecting her space. They climbed down and went back inside. The fireplace crackled gently, casting a warm glow on their rain-soaked skin. Ivy handed him an old towel. "Dry off. You're soaked." He took it, eyes never leaving her. "Ivy, I don't want to hurt you anymore, but I need to know about Caleb, if he's my son." "Not tonight," she interrupted, her voice firm. "I need time." Nathaniel nodded. "I'll wait, however long it takes." Ivy led him to the door. The rain was still falling. "Thanks for fixing the roof," she said. "You should go now." Nathaniel stepped outside but turned before getting into his car. "I'll come back, Ivy. Not to take anything, but to prove I can stay." She closed the door without answering, but as the headlights faded into the distance, Ivy sat on the floor and buried her face in her hands. Nathaniel's embrace still clung to her, and no matter how hard she tried to deny it, he was still part of her, and part of Caleb. The morning after the storm, the Tennessee sky was clear and bright, and dewdrops sparkled across the golden cornfields. Ivy Monroe stood in the kitchen, brewing coffee with an old ceramic pot, trying to keep her mind busy. But the memory of the night before, Nathaniel's arms around her in the rain, the regret in his eyes, kept looping in her thoughts, making it impossible to focus. She had told him to leave, had tried to maintain distance, but his presence, his persistence, was shaking the wall she had spent 7 years building. The silver ring on her finger, once a bitter reminder of a mistake, now seemed to carry a different meaning. Caleb burst into the kitchen, his brown hair tousled, holding up a new drawing. "Mom, I drew Mr. Nathaniel's car," he shouted excitedly, showing her a colorful, clumsy sketch of a black Mustang. Ivy smiled, but her heart ached. Caleb liked Nathaniel, and that scared her as much as it warmed her. She didn't want her son to get attached to a man who might walk away again. Outside, an engine rumbled. Ivy looked out the window and saw Nathaniel's Mustang pulling into the driveway. He stepped out, wearing a plain white shirt instead of a suit, but still carrying the same undeniable elegance. Ivy clenched her hands, took a deep breath, and opened the door before he could knock. "Nathaniel, why are you back?" she asked, her voice cold, but less sharp than before. "I need to talk," he said seriously. "About Caleb. About us. I can't leave without knowing the truth." Ivy crossed her arms, her gaze wary. "Caleb's here. I don't want him hearing any of this." Nathaniel nodded. "We can talk outside. Just a few minutes." She hesitated, but the firmness in his eyes made her nod. "Wait here." She stepped back in, told Caleb to stay in his room, then grabbed her coat and walked into the yard with Nathaniel. They stood beneath the old oak tree as morning wind rustled the leaves above. The early light was calm, but between them a storm still raged. Nathaniel broke the silence. "Ivy, I thought about everything last night, about Caleb. That boy, he's mine, isn't he?" The question landed like a blade, sharp and inescapable. Ivy turned away, her gaze falling to the fields. She had known this moment would come, but she still wasn't ready. She drew in a shaky breath, then nodded, her voice low. "Yes, Caleb is your son." Nathaniel froze, as if her words confirmed what he had feared and hoped in equal measure. He closed his eyes, fist clenched. "Why didn't you tell me? 7 years, Ivy. 7 years I didn't know I had a child." Ivy turned back, eyes red with emotion, her voice bitter. "Tell you? Nathaniel, you left the morning after our wedding night. No phone number, no address. I called your lawyer. I wrote letters, but they said you were busy, that you didn't want to be disturbed. I was pregnant, alone, while the whole town whispered that I was the Monroe girl who got herself knocked up. What do you think I could have done?" Nathaniel stepped back, her words hitting like blows. "I didn't know," he said hoarsely. "I swear, Ivy, I didn't know you were pregnant. If I had known, "What?" Ivy cut in, voice trembling. "You'd come back? Stick around? or send money to shut me up? Our marriage was a transaction, Nathaniel. You needed me for status. I needed you to save my family. That night, it wasn't love. It was duty. I didn't want to use Caleb to hold on to you. I didn't want my child growing up in a fake family. Nathaniel stood still, heart heavy. He remembered that cold hotel room, their awkward closeness, the silence between them. But he also remembered the moment he looked into her eyes and saw more than just obligation. He had left thinking it was for the best, but now he saw the weight he'd left her to carry alone. I was wrong, he said quietly. I was wrong to leave, and wrong not to reach out. But Ivy, I'm here now. I want to take responsibility, not just for Caleb, but for you. Ivy let out a hollow laugh and shook her head. You don't get it, Nathaniel. I don't need you to rescue me. Caleb and I are fine. I've worked, I've raised my son, I've built this life without you. And now you show up, and everything's a mess again. Nathaniel stepped forward, his eyes softer. I'm not here to mess it up. I just want to be part of it. I want to know Caleb. I want to make up for the years I missed. And I want to understand you, Ivy. The woman who kept that ring, even when I didn't deserve it. Ivy turned away, tears slipping down her cheeks. She gripped the silver ring tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I kept it for Caleb, she whispered, because every time I looked at him, I needed to remember that it wasn't just my mistake. But I don't trust you, Nathaniel. Not after everything. He nodded, honoring her honesty. I understand. I don't expect you to trust me right away. But I'll prove it. I'm staying in Greenbrier. I'm not going anywhere until you and Caleb are ready. She looked at him, her eyes a mix of doubt and exhaustion. You say that now. But what happens when Nashville calls? Or London? We don't belong in your world. My world changed the moment I saw Caleb, Nathaniel said firmly. And when I saw you. I'm not promising I can fix everything overnight, but I am promising to try. Before Ivy could respond, Caleb ran out from the house and wrapped himself around her leg. Mom, I finished my drawing. He beamed, then looked at Nathaniel curiously. You came back. Are you going to stay and play? Nathaniel crouched down and smiled at him. If your mom says it's okay, I'd love to stay for a bit. Ivy looked from her son to Nathaniel. She didn't want Caleb to get his hopes up, but the eagerness in her son's eyes made her falter. Just for a little while, she said quietly. But don't make him promises you can't keep, Nathaniel. Don't let my son down. Nathaniel nodded, gaze steady. I won't. They went back into the house and Caleb pulled Nathaniel into his room to show off his drawing. Ivy stood in the doorway, watching them, father and son, and her heart twisted. Nathaniel laughed with Caleb, listened to every word like it mattered, and for the first time Ivy saw someone different from the cold businessman of the past. But fear still lingered. Fear that he would leave again. Fear that she would open her heart, only to be broken once more. When Nathaniel finally stood to go, he paused at the door and looked back at her. I'll come back, he said, not to force anything, but to show you I mean it. She didn't respond, only closed the door behind him. But when the headlights disappeared down the road, Ivy sat down and held Caleb's drawing to her chest. She knew no matter how hard she tried, Nathaniel was already part of their life, and whether she admitted it or not, a small, fragile part of her still hoped he'd keep his word. The first rays of afternoon sunlight glistened across the Tennessee fields, catching the dew still clinging to the cornstalks after the storm. Ivy Monroe stood in the yard, watching Caleb kick around an old ball. His radiant smile was all she needed to keep going. But after her conversation with Nathaniel that morning, her heart was in turmoil. He knew the truth about Caleb now. He had promised to stay. But she couldn't shake the fear that he might leave again, just like he had 7 years ago. The silver ring on her finger, once a bitter reminder of pain, now held a fragile hope she didn't dare admit. Nathaniel Quinn sat in a temporary office in Nashville, less than an hour's drive from Greenbrier. He had postponed meetings in London, canceled his flight, and rented a small apartment in town to be closer to Ivy and Caleb. He knew rebuilding trust wouldn't be easy, but every time he thought of Caleb's smile or Ivy's fierce, guarded eyes, his resolve deepened. What he didn't expect was that his past and present were about to collide in a way he couldn't control. That afternoon, a white BMW pulled up in front of Ivy's farmhouse. A woman stepped out, blonde hair tied high, dressed in an expensive pencil skirt and heels, completely unsuited for the muddy dirt road. Ivy was picking up the ball for Caleb when she paused, eyes narrowing warily. The woman approached with a polite but icy smile. "You're Ivy Monroe?" she asked sharply. "I am," Ivy replied, pulling Caleb behind her. "Who are you?" "Elise Harper," the woman said, eyes scanning Ivy and Caleb with judgment. "Nathaniel Quinn's fiancé." Ivy's heart skipped a beat, but her face remained calm. "I didn't know he had a fiancé," she said coolly. "He never mentioned you." Elise smirked and pulled an iPad from her designer bag, tapping open a news article. "Maybe he was too busy digging into your past. Did you know the Nashville press loves stories like this? Poor single mother signed a contract marriage with Nathaniel to save her family. And now? An illegitimate child?" Ivy clenched her fists, blood rushing to her face. "What do you want?" Elise stepped closer, her tone syrupy but poisonous. "I want you out of Nathaniel's life. He's mine, and I won't let a scandal like you ruin our future. If you don't leave, I'll make sure all of Tennessee knows who you are. A gold digger using a child to trap a CEO. Behind Ivy, Caleb clung to her hand. "Mom? What's she talking about?" he asked, voice small and anxious. Ivy knelt and gave him a forced smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Go play inside." She gently pushed him toward the house, then turned back, her gaze sharp as glass. "Don't threaten me, Miss Harper. I'm not afraid of you or your headlines. I'm just trying to raise my son. And Nathaniel knows that." Elise raised a brow, unfazed. "You're not afraid? What about the boy? You want him growing up hearing whispers? The child of a contract marriage?" She shoved the iPad back into her bag. "Leave Greenbrier, or I'll make sure you regret staying." The BMW kicked up dust as it disappeared down the road, but Ivy stood frozen, hands trembling. She wasn't afraid for herself, but Elise's words about Caleb cut like a blade. Ivy had endured whispers and judgment for 7 years, but she couldn't let her son be dragged into the same storm. She walked back inside and found Caleb playing in his room. Her heart shattered. She couldn't let Nathaniel, or anyone from his world, pull them into a media circus. That night, Nathaniel returned to the farmhouse holding a small bicycle for Caleb. He had promised not to disappoint the boy, and he wanted to start with something simple. But when he knocked, Ivy opened the door with eyes colder than he'd ever seen. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice firm. Nathaniel frowned, sensing something had shifted. "Ivy, what happened?" "I just wanted—" "Elise Harper was here," Ivy interrupted, pain in her eyes. "Your fiancé. She said she'd expose everything. Our marriage contract, Caleb, all of it. She wants me gone." Nathaniel froze, his face darkening. "Elise had no right to come here. I didn't know she did. I'll deal with her. Ivy, I swear." "But she was here," Ivy said, voice shaking. "And she's right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. Caleb doesn't either. I don't want my son growing up in headlines and gossip. I was wrong to let you back in." Nathaniel stepped forward, reaching for her hand, but she pulled back. "Ivy, please. Don't let Elise or anyone else hurt you and Caleb." "I won't let that happen. I promise." "Promise?" Ivy laughed bitterly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You promised once before, Nathaniel. You said you'd keep your word. And then you left. Now you have a fiancé, a life I'll never be part of. I can't risk Caleb getting hurt." She pulled the silver ring from her finger and placed it in his palm. "Take it. I don't want it anymore. And don't come back." Nathaniel closed his hand around the ring, his chest aching. "Ivy, don't do this. Don't shut me out. I can't lose you both. Not again." But Ivy turned away and closed the door. She slid down to the floor, face in her hands, silent tears falling. She had thought she could open her heart again, but now all she wanted was to protect Caleb, even if it meant walking away from Nathaniel forever. Outside, Nathaniel stood still, the cold metal of the ring pressing into his palm. He knew Elise had crossed a line, and he would confront her. But deep down, he also knew this wasn't just about Elise. This was about his own failures, his silence, his absence. He looked back at the house where Caleb and Ivy were, and swore no matter how many times Ivy pushed him away, he would not give up. Not this time. Night blanketed Nashville, and the Grand Bell Hotel glowed like a jewel in the heart of the city. The ballroom shimmered with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and cascading silk drapes. Hundreds of guests, business leaders, politicians, reporters, gathered to witness the engagement party of Nathaniel Quinn, CEO of Quinn Enterprises, and Elise Harper, daughter of a powerful Tennessee family. But Nathaniel's thoughts weren't on the party. In his pocket was a cold silver ring, and in his heart, the image of Ivy Monroe closing the door in his face, leaving behind an ache nothing else could fill. After Ivy left Greenbrier, Nathaniel tried to find her. He called, drove to the farmhouse, only to find it empty. The neighbor said Ivy and Caleb had gone, without leaving an address. He knew she had left because of Elise's threats, because she feared Caleb would be hurt by the media storm. Nathaniel realized his greatest mistake. 7 years ago, he'd treated his marriage to Ivy like a business contract, and now he'd made the same mistake again, letting Elise believe in a love that was never real. He remembered the hollow years after he left Ivy, despite all his money and success, and vowed he wouldn't let ambition take his family from him again. Inside the ballroom, Elise stood in the crowd in a sparkling silver gown, her smile poised and confident. She raised a glass of champagne, chatting with guests, though her eyes searched for Nathaniel. He entered late, dressed in a tailored black suit, face unreadable but eyes full of resolve. Elise approached, gently taking his hand. "You look tense," she whispered. "Relax. Tonight's ours." Nathaniel slowly pulled his hand away. His voice was quiet. "Elise, I can't do this. I'm sorry for letting you believe in something that wasn't real. I was wrong to treat love like a contract. I won't hurt you by pretending." Elise froze, fingers tightening around her glass, her face draining of color. "You're insane. You can't do this. Not in front of everyone. You'll ruin me." "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said sincerely, "but I need to fix what I broke." He turned away and walked to the stage where a microphone waited. The crowd fell silent, eyes turning toward him. Elise stood in place, trembling, her perfect smile collapsing. Nathaniel took the mic, his voice low but clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but I have something I need to say, not just to you, but to myself." He paused, memories flooding in. 7 years ago in a cold hotel room, leaving Ivy behind, believing their contract was enough. He remembered the emptiness that followed and the mistake he made again with Elise. "I once saw marriage as a business transaction. I was wrong. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, twice. Ivy Monroe, the woman I left 7 years ago, kept the ring I gave her, even when I didn't deserve it. She's the mother of my son, Caleb, and I left them both behind chasing power." Gas rippled through the room. Cameras flashed, but Nathaniel continued, steady. "Elise Harper, I'm sorry. You deserve real love. And I'm not that person. I misled you, and I take full responsibility. I can't marry you because I gave my heart away a long time ago." He held up the silver ring. "Ivy gave this back to me, but I won't give up. I'll find her, and if she lets me, I'll spend the rest of my life making things right." A few claps broke the silence, joined by murmurs and camera shutters. Elise turned and stormed out, her flawless composure shattered. Headlines raced through media outlets. CEO calls off engagement, apologizes to fiancé, declares love for woman in secret son. Quinn Enterprises stock wavered. Reporters swarmed, the scandal ignited. Nathaniel left the hotel, driving straight toward Greenbrier. But instead of the empty farmhouse, he stopped at a local cafe, asked around, contacted lawyers, anything to find Ivy. He knew she didn't want to be found, but he couldn't give up. The ring in his hand reminded him. He had lost her once to his mistakes. He wouldn't lose her again. In a small town several hours from Greenbrier, Ivy sat in a rented house watching Caleb sleep. She turned on the radio and heard the news. Nathaniel Quinn shocks guests by calling off engagement, apologizing to fiancé, and confessing love for a woman and their son. She turned it off, hands trembling, tears silently falling. She didn't know whether she could trust him, or if she was just running from her own heart. Meanwhile, Nathaniel sat in his car under a sky full of stars. He had chosen Ivy, chosen Caleb, and though storms lay ahead, he finally felt at peace. He would find them, and this time, no contract, no fear. He would not let anything stand in his way. The Tennessee sky hung a pale gray, clouds drifting lazily across the endless fields. Nathaniel Quinn drove his Mustang along winding country roads, his eyes flicking between the horizon and the worn paper map on the passenger seat. It had been a week since the canceled engagement party in Nashville, when he publicly called off his engagement to Elise Harper, apologized for the lie he'd let grow between them, and declared his love for Ivy Monroe and their son, Caleb. The news had swept across Tennessee, rattling Quinn Enterprises stock and thrusting Nathaniel into a media firestorm. But he didn't care about the headlines or the fallout. All that mattered now was finding Ivy and Caleb, the family he had lost by treating marriage like a business deal. Nathaniel had searched Greenbrier relentlessly, asked around the cafe, the grocery store, even Caleb's school. A sliver of hope had come from one of Ivy's old friends, a teacher at the school, who recalled Ivy mentioning a small church in Lebanon, 3 hours east. It was a place her mother used to pray. Nathaniel didn't know if she would be there, but it was his only lead. In his pocket, the silver ring Ivy had returned pressed like a weight against his heart, pushing him forward. Meanwhile, Ivy sat on a wooden pew inside the quiet church in Lebanon. Stained glass windows bathed the stone floor in shades of green and red. Caleb played in the corner, stacking wooden blocks into the shape of a car. Ivy watched him, heart heavy. She had left Greenbrier to protect him, from the press, from the rumors Elise had threatened. But the news of Nathaniel's speech, his apology to Elise, his public acknowledgement of her and Caleb, had found her on the radio, and now she couldn't run from her emotions. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if he had truly changed, or if it was just another promise waiting to be broken. The church door creaked open. Ivy looked up, her heart pounding. Nathaniel stepped inside, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair tousled from the wind. He saw her instantly, and the look in his eyes, deep, aching, hopeful, stopped her breath. Caleb paused, watching the man curiously. "Ivy," Nathaniel said, voice rough, stepping forward but stopping a few paces away, as if afraid she might vanish. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Ivy stood, arms crossed, eyes red but firm. "You shouldn't be here, Nathaniel. I told you. I don't want you disrupting our lives." "I know," he said softly, "but I can't let you and Caleb go. Not again. I was wrong to leave you 7 years ago. Wrong to treat our marriage like a contract. I don't want to make that mistake ever again." Ivy shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You say that, but then what? You have a whole world waiting in Nashville, in London. Caleb and I don't belong in that world, and after what Elise said, I can't let my son be hurt." Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice steady and sincere. "Elise is no longer a problem. I ended everything with her, in front of everyone. I apologize for dragging her into something false. I was wrong, Ivy, not just with you, but with her too. But I'm here now, for you, for Caleb. I don't want a contract. I want a family." Hearing his name, Caleb ran to Ivy and grabbed her hand. "Mom, what's Mr. Nathaniel saying?" Then he turned to Nathaniel, eyes bright. "Are you my dad?" The question sliced through the silence like a blade. Ivy dropped to her knees, holding Caleb close, her voice caught in her throat. "Caleb, sweetheart." She didn't know what to say, didn't want to give him hope that might crumble. Nathaniel knelt to Caleb's level, his eyes shining with emotion. "I'm someone who wants to be your dad, Caleb," he said gently. "But I made a big mistake, and I need your mom's permission. I promise I'll do my best, if you and she give me a chance." Caleb tilted his head, thoughtful, then grinned. "You have a cool car. I like you." He turned and ran back to his blocks, content again. Ivy stood, wiping her tears, but her voice stayed cautious. "You don't understand, Nathaniel. Promises aren't enough. I raised Caleb alone for 7 years. I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if you'll stay." Nathaniel nodded, pulling the silver ring from his pocket and placing it in her hand. I don't expect you to believe me right away, but I'm here to prove it. I canceled my flight to London. I rented a place in Greenbrier. I'm not going anywhere. This ring isn't a contract anymore. It's a promise. Ivy looked down at the ring, her fingers trembling. She remembered the nights she cried alone, the long days working to feed Caleb, and every moment she looked at her son and saw Nathaniel in his eyes. She wanted to believe him, but fear still clung tightly. Nathaniel, she whispered, if you hurt Caleb again, I'll never forgive you. Never. I know, he said, voice unwavering, and I won't let that happen. I lost you both once. I won't lose you again. They stood in the quiet church, the colored light casting soft shadows across their faces. Ivy gripped the ring tightly, not putting it back on, but not letting it go. I need time, she said. Not for me, for Caleb. Nathaniel's gaze softened. I'll wait, as long as it takes. Caleb ran over, tugging on Nathaniel's hand. Come see my car. Nathaniel smiled and followed him to the corner, crouching to admire the wooden creation. Ivy watched them, father and son, and her heart twisted. She didn't know if she could open herself again. But for the first time, she saw a different Nathaniel. Not the cold businessman from 7 years ago, but a man who had chosen to stay. As Nathaniel left the church, he turned back to Ivy. I'll come back, he said, not to pressure you, but to show you I mean it. Ivy didn't answer, but her eyes were no longer cold. She held Caleb close, staring down at the silver ring in her palm. She didn't know if she could trust him, but a small part of her hoped he'd keep his word. Nathaniel climbed into his car and drove toward Greenbrier. The media noise raged on. His company faced pressure, but none of it mattered. He had found Ivy and Caleb, and this time no contract or ambition would stand in his way. The silver ring, though not yet on Ivy's hand, was now a symbol of the family he was determined to win back. Do you believe love deserves a second chance? Subscribe and share this story with someone who still believes in forever. The late autumn days in Lebanon, Tennessee, carried a crisp chill and the scent of dry leaves drifting in the breeze. Ivy Monroe sat on the porch bench of her small rented house, watching Caleb pedal his old bicycle around the yard. His radiant smile was the only light in her tumultuous days. A week had passed since Nathaniel Quinn found her in the church, kneeling to ask for forgiveness and pleading for a chance to make amends. His words, sincere and full of remorse, still echoed in her mind, but Ivy remained cautious. She had endured too much pain, and above all, she wanted to protect Caleb from any promises that might shatter. True to his word, Nathaniel didn't pressure her. He rented a small apartment in Lebanon, just a few blocks from Ivy's house, and began appearing in her and Caleb's lives in simple ways. He brought a set of paints for Caleb after hearing the boy liked drawing cars. He stopped by in the afternoons to help fix the broken fence in front of the house. He demanded nothing, only quietly demonstrating that he wanted to stay. Ivy realized that, even as she tried to keep her distance, his presence was gradually seeping into her heart. That afternoon, Nathaniel arrived with a pumpkin pie from the local bakery. Caleb squealed with delight, running out to hug his leg. Uncle Nathaniel, does this pie have whipped cream? He asked, eyes gleaming. Nathaniel laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. Of course, but you'll have to ask your mom first. He looked at Ivy, his gaze gentle but unassuming. I thought Caleb might like it. Hope you don't mind. Ivy stood at the door, arms crossed, her eyes still wary but softer. It's fine. Come in. It's cold outside. They sat around the small wooden table in the kitchen, with Caleb eagerly recounting his day at school and his new drawing. Nathaniel listened attentively, asking questions, and occasionally laughing heartily when Caleb described racing his friends on the playground. Ivy observed, noting that Nathaniel wasn't just trying to please Caleb. He genuinely cared. He remembered Caleb's friends' names and the stories the boy had shared the previous week. This realization warmed her, but also frightened her, afraid that if she opened her heart, she might be hurt again. After a simple dinner with pumpkin pie, Caleb dragged Nathaniel outside to play ball. Ivy stood on the porch, watching the two, father and son, chasing each other and laughing under the setting sun. Caleb was the bridge, drawing Nathaniel and Ivy closer, even as she maintained an invisible wall. When Caleb tripped and fell, Nathaniel rushed over, lifting him up and checking his knee with genuine concern. Ivy felt her heart skip a beat. She had never seen anyone, besides herself, care for Caleb like that. Later that night, as Caleb yawned and hugged Nathaniel before heading to bed, he asked sleepily, "Uncle, will you come back tomorrow?" Nathaniel smiled, tousling the boy's hair. "If your mom agrees, I'll be back." With Caleb asleep, Ivy and Nathaniel sat on the old sofa in the living room, the dim light from the lamp casting a soft glow on their faces. Silence enveloped them, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Ivy held a cup of cocoa, her eyes glancing at Nathaniel. "You don't have to do all this," she said softly. "The pie, the fence, playing with Caleb. You don't need to prove anything." Nathaniel looked at her, his eyes deep and earnest. "I want to, Ivy. Not to prove anything, but because I want to be part of this life. I've missed 7 years with Caleb, with you. I don't want to miss another day." Ivy tightened her grip on the cup, her gaze wavering. "You say that, but I'm still scared. Scared you'll leave, like 7 years ago. Scared Caleb will love you, and then you'll disappear." Nathaniel lowered his head, his hands clasped tightly. "I don't blame you for being scared. I've hurt you, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But Ivy, I'm here not out of obligation. I'm here because every time I look at Caleb, I see a part of myself. And every time I look at you, I see the woman who makes me want to be better." His words swept through the walls around Ivy's heart like a gentle breeze. She turned away, tears silently falling. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered, "but when I see you with Caleb, I want to." Nathaniel reached out, hesitating, then gently touched her hand. "Then let me help you believe. Not with words, but with time." Ivy didn't pull her hand away. His touch was warm, tender, like an unspoken promise. They sat there in the darkness, whispering about small things, about Caleb, about days in Lebanon, about dreams they had buried. For the first time, Ivy saw Nathaniel not as the cold businessman from 7 years ago, but as a man striving, step by step, to be worthy of her and their son. That night, as Nathaniel prepared to leave, Ivy stood at the door, her eyes softer than ever. "Thank you for today," she said. "Caleb had a great time." Nathaniel smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I did too, Ivy. Not just because of Caleb, but because of you." He turned to leave but paused, pulling out a small drawing Caleb had given him. A picture of a Mustang car with 3 figures beside it. Nathaniel, Caleb, and Ivy. "He drew us," he said, his voice husky. "I want us to be real like this." Ivy looked at the drawing, her heart trembling. She didn't respond, but as Nathaniel drove away, she stood at the door longer, her eyes following the fading headlights. Feelings, though small, were sprouting within her, like a seed planted by Caleb and nurtured by Nathaniel's sincerity. In his small apartment in Lebanon, Nathaniel sat on a chair, gazing at Caleb's drawing. He thought about the boy's smile, Ivy's hesitant eyes, and the gentle touch of her hand that evening. He knew the journey ahead was long, but for the first time he felt hope. He had missed 7 years, but now, with Caleb as the bridge, he would do everything to build a real family. A year passed in Lebanon, Tennessee, bringing gentle autumn days and golden leaves scattered across the fields. Ivy Monroe stood outside her small house, watching 7-year-old Caleb ride his new bike down the dirt road, laughing as Nathaniel Quinn pretended to chase him. The love between Ivy and Nathaniel had grown slowly, like a quiet but steady river. Nathaniel had kept his promise. He stayed in Lebanon, proving day by day that he was no longer the man who once treated marriage like a contract. He had become an irreplaceable part of Ivy and Caleb's lives, and Ivy's once wounded heart had slowly opened to him. Nathaniel didn't just stay, he changed his whole world. He moved most of Quinn Enterprises' projects to Tennessee, focusing on community development, building schools, fixing roads, and supporting local farmers. His Nashville office became a small satellite branch, while he spent most of his time in Lebanon, working out of a modest office in town. He told Ivy he wanted Caleb to grow up in a better place, and she began to believe he wasn't doing it just for them, but because he himself had found meaning in simplicity. That afternoon, the three of them sat in the backyard on a blanket, eating sandwiches and drinking lemonade Ivy had made. Caleb lay on the grass, talking about his dream of becoming an astronaut, then suddenly turned to Nathaniel. "Dad, have you ever flown into the sky?" he asked with wide-eyed wonder. Nathaniel smiled, his heart swelling at the word dad. After months of steady rebuilding, Ivy had finally agreed to let Caleb call him that. A milestone that moved Nathaniel more than any business victory ever had. "Not yet," he said, ruffling the boy's hair. "But if you do well in school, I'll take you to see a real airplane." Ivy watched them, her heart full. Caleb had become their bridge, bringing her and Nathaniel together through simple, everyday moments, playing ball in the yard, baking cookies, movie nights on the couch. But that evening, after Caleb fell asleep, Ivy and Nathaniel sat together on the porch under a starry sky, and the conversation turned more serious. "Ivy," Nathaniel said, his voice low, fingers laced. "I've never asked you, what was it like, those 7 years, raising Caleb alone? I want to know, even if it hurts." Ivy looked down at her lemonade, her eyes distant. She rarely spoke of those years, but the honesty in Nathaniel's voice opened something inside her. "It wasn't easy," she said softly. "When you left, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified, Nathaniel. The whole town whispered behind my back, calling me the reckless girl. I worked at a garage, sold honey, mended clothes, anything to make ends meet. There were nights I didn't sleep, just holding Caleb and wondering if I was strong enough. But every time he smiled, I knew I had to keep going." Nathaniel clenched his hands, eyes rimmed with tears. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I wasn't there when you needed me most. I turned our marriage into a deal and left you with all the pain." Ivy shook her head, her voice softening. "I used to be angry. But now, seeing you with Caleb, seeing how hard you've tried, I'm not angry anymore. I just want us to be honest, Nathaniel. No more contracts, no more business deals." Nathaniel reached for her hand, gently interlacing their fingers. "I am being honest, Ivy. You and Caleb, you are my whole world. I lost 7 years, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it right." She looked into his eyes, feeling the warmth in his touch. Their love, born from pain, had grown into something real, quiet but unshakable. She didn't reply, but her small smile was all Nathaniel needed. Weeks later, Nathaniel brought Ivy and Caleb to a lavender field near Lebanon, where he'd once helped build a community center. The sunset painted everything gold, and the scent of lavender floated on the breeze. Caleb ran through the rows, laughing, while Nathaniel held Ivy's hand, eyes shining. "Ivy," he said, stopping in the middle of the field, his voice trembling. "I've thought a lot about us, about Caleb, about the future. I don't want to just visit your lives. I want to be your family. Forever." He knelt down, pulling a silver ring from his pocket. Not the old contract ring, but a new one, simple, engraved with her name. "Ivy Monroe, will you marry me? Not for a contract, but because I love you, and I want to spend my life with you and Caleb." Ivy froze, tears falling freely. She looked at Nathaniel, then at Caleb running toward them, and her heart overflowed. "Yes," she whispered. "I will marry you." Caleb squealed and wrapped his arms around them. "We're a family," he shouted, and the three of them embraced under the sunset, complete at last. The wedding was held right there in the lavender field. Simple but full of joy. No wealthy guests, no fancy venue. Ivy wore a plain white dress she sewed herself, no makeup, but glowing. Nathaniel wore a white shirt and jeans, grinning beside her. Caleb, as ring bearer, tossed lavender petals down the aisle with glee. Before a small group of neighbors and loved ones, Nathaniel took Ivy's hand and spoke with conviction. "She was just a girl I married for a contract, but she taught me what love is, what family means. Ivy, you are my whole world." Ivy smiled, tears shimmering. "You were once a deal, Nathaniel, but now you are my home." They exchanged rings, kissed beneath the golden light, and Caleb ran to hug them both as the crowd cheered. After the wedding, they returned to their little house in Lebanon, ready to live a simple life. Nathaniel continued his community projects. Ivy opened a small bakery. Caleb grew up surrounded by love. Their life wasn't glamorous, but it was full of peace, laughter, and a quiet happiness they once thought impossible. What's more beautiful, a lavish wedding or a quiet vow whispered in love? Comment Ivy and Nathaniel forever if their story touched your heart.